Welcome to Changing the Game, where bold leaders, rule breakers, and trailblazers drop the playbook and share how they lead, win, and shake things up. Hey there, it's Jordan, your host. If you've been loving the conversations on Changing the Game, I'm excited to introduce something new, the Nobody Cares Club, a show about building the life you actually want without worrying so much about what everyone else thinks. We're talking confidence, wellness, identity, relationships, and the reminder that nobody is thinking about you as much as you think they are. And that's the best news you'll ever hear. So stop waiting, stop overthinking, and get ready to be inspired to go after your dreams. Search Nobody Cares Club wherever you listen, launching summer 2026. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, I'm joined by Stefanie Francis. She's a former Division I volleyball player at George Washington University, an art major turned professor, and now founder of Hootology, a tech-forward research company helping brands think differently about how they understand people. Stefanie has built her career challenging how companies think about research. She questions traditional methods, she pushes back on right or wrong thinking, and blends creativity with everything she does. I'm excited to dig into her athlete background and how her founder journey has shaped the way she thinks and how she's changing the game in business. So excited to have you here, Stefanie. Welcome.
Thank you, Jordan. Super happy to be here.
I say this in a lot of episodes, but one of my favorite people or types of people to talk to on the show are founders, entrepreneurs, because I just love the way your brain works. And you have this really I don't want to say non-traditional background, but you're an art major and a D1 athlete, which I feel like can have this duality energy. So I just would love if you could just talk a little bit about that. You play Division I volleyball. How do you blend your creativity and your competitive drive? How does that complement each other?
Yeah, I think it comes together in a way that makes me constantly not sure of anything, which I think is a positive. And in this world where we're sort of really being pushed to what's kind of these silos of what's right and what's wrong, I think what kind of came through starting in my college years up until now. I'm squarely Gen X, so I'm old, getting up there in age, but it's around constantly questioning, like, could this be better, and how could we think about this differently, and how could we make it different, right? And I
Yeah.
remember back when I was at GW, I was an art major for the first 3 years of my time there, and my collegiate athlete friends would be like, what, you draw all day, and then my art school classmates were like, wait, you sweat like on purpose? And
Yeah,
so
I love
it was
that.
just this moment of constantly being misunderstood, which was great because that's stayed forever. But really, that unsureness, right? With art, there isn't a right and wrong, and then sort of to be in the world where everything is supposed to be right and wrong. It's like, is it? Like, what if we looked at that objectively and kind of held it out here at a little bit of a distance and wondered? And I think about this. I listened to Annie Leibovitz was recently on this, my new favorite podcast, which is called Fashion Neurosis, which is hosted by Bella Freud, who is Sigmund Freud's granddaughter. And
Oh,
and so she does it. It's really cool. She does it analyst style. So she literally has her guests lay down on a couch and she sits to the side and she asks the most beautiful questions that I've never heard another interviewer ask. And at its core, it's around fashion and the choices that we make from a fashion perspective, but not from like a shallow, egotistical way that most people think about fashion, but around like, how is this an expression of who you are? And I remember her saying in this episode to Annie Leibovitz, I heard someone describe you, Annie, as the most insanely confident, unsure person at all times. And then when you hear her talk, she's not talking like that she's the best in the world at what she does. She's talking about all of the ways that she knows she could be better, or the things that she's questioning. And she says those out loud, which if you didn't know her accomplishments, someone could easily be like, oh, she's a novice. And
mhm.
it's interesting, and it was beautiful for me to hear because I am constantly speaking out loud the things I'm unsure about. And then I realize that at times people take that as insecurity or as weakness. And I'm like, no, I'm just not really good at that, or I'm still working on that. And that's okay.
Wow.
So how do we find and make that art piece, right? That like the never complete, a piece, a part of our whole lives, and constantly getting better. I don't know. I think that's how those two come together.
I absolutely love that. I think you said a couple of things that really stuck with me there when you talked about um, being unsure. You would think if you didn't know her accomplishments, she was a novice. But to me, that kind of sounds like what I've heard in my career in life is just like always approaching things with a little bit of a beginner mindset.
Yeah.
Like if you approach things like you know everything, then what more are you gonna learn?
Right.
So I think it's really important. I think that's great. Like you really do need to approach things with a beginner mindset. And I'm sure that's showed up for you or shown up for you in your entire career trajectory so far. And the last thing that you said that really, really stuck with me was when you were in college and you were constantly misunderstood. I almost feel
Yeah.
like that's pretty powerful because like no one can put a label on you. No one can be like, oh, I know exactly what I think about Stephanie. It's that she's an art student and that's her, or she's just an athlete and she's the dumb jock or whatever it is, like whatever the stereotypes are, it's like you were able to challenge that right off the bat.
For sure.
When did when did that actually I'm curious too how when did you know you wanted to be an artist or that you cared about art and how did you get to playing volleyball at GW? Because we both have the volleyball background, so I want to hear your story, how you
Yeah.
ended up there, and then why art? Why did you decide that that was going to be the path you started to pursue?
Yeah. I have I don't think I have the same connected memories that I think a lot of other people have in terms of their early decisions and their early life. I feel like a lot of my life starts to come in focus around like later high school and college years. So I don't know if I can authentically answer that question other than um, where I feel really lucky, and especially around the landing at George Washington piece, is I grew up in Arizona, and I was so fortunate to be on a club team that had some really really incredible players. I think two went on to play either in the Olympics or on the beach tour. That was a really big deal at the time, and so we were pretty high ranked nationally. And my collegiate coach at GW, her strategy was to take like the fifth, sixth, and seventh best players from the top teams in the country because they know and are used to winning.
Yep.
And so we still, though, as a collective, were a little bit of the bad news bears. And she really was able to get us to be competitive at the national level by kind of that interconnectivity of the totality of the unit. And
Mhm.
I had a moment, I ended up coaching collegiately for the first few years after graduation. And I don't think I realized what a great coach my coach Susie was, because I remember I was at Iowa State, and the coaches there were really more traditional of like, they had higher talented athletes, they had taller, faster, people who could jump a lot higher. But my college team would have completely dominated that a match against those two. And it's like, well, why? Like, what is that piece? And that's where I feel so fortunate to have had that experience. And so I can't say why I chose GW other than it was some sort of a feeling of like, this is where I'm supposed to be. It wasn't at all the college campus that, we all grow up thinking about and seeing in terms of like the beautiful towers and the campus. And it was really like you almost didn't know you were on the campus. And I was like, I'm not sure, but I'm supposed to be here. And I really was so fortunate for so many ways. And um, coming from the place I grew up in and the family I grew up in, to be exposed to people from around the world and different cultures and the beauty of different cultures, as well as a really special kind of team and moment in time, and having access to um, things that were happening in the world that I had never been exposed to. So I remember my freshman year, there was one of the first ever marches for the LGBTQ plus community, which at that time I was just starting to understand that I was a part of. It was 1991. And so to go from knowing one person, two people who were gay, so we were all gay then, there weren't all of the names. If you were gay or you weren't gay. I love all the new names. It's fun. It's like, what does that mean? Ooh, maybe I would have been that. But to see thousands and thousands and thousands of people walking down the street and claiming their identity, it's like I think about my college education, I think about those moments, and getting to go to the Million Man March and sort of be able to see history taking place and listen to, all of the amazing speakers that day. And like the education that GW gave me had nothing to do, well, had a lot to do with inside the walls, but a lot to do with outside of it. So luck, I
Absolutely.
think, is what I attribute it to.
Absolutely. I think that's so important to acknowledge too. It's like luck, or you step into rooms that maybe you didn't know would be the right ones and it
Yeah.
worked out. Or even if it's not exactly the right room, it
Yeah.
teaches you so much for that next chapter and finding the right room. And
Yeah.
I so related to your story, Stephanie, talking about your team being kind of like the underdog vibe. Like that was me at Wichita State. That was our team. We were the under recruited girls, and put us together. But we all had attitude and wanted to win. And there's something about that like grittiness that I think can't be taught. Some of it can't be taught, and when you're surrounded with a team that also has that same, just like, we're going to make it happen, we're going to work, and it gives you the appreciate, like it helps you appreciate that attitude, because like you went
Yeah.
to Iowa State and you're like, this is just different. It's not,
Yeah.
it's just different.
Yeah. I remember I asked the coaches that I was coach. I was a second assistant coach, or 22 and just getting started. And I remember just really struggling in those first couple of months. And I sat them down, or we were sitting down. I didn't sat them down. They probably sat me down to get me in line. But I remember an interesting question came out of me, and I wasn't conscious of thinking about it, but I said, why do you coach? Like
Mm,
it seems like you don't like this. It seems like you don't like the players. It seems like you're just, and I think that why piece, which ironically is connecting to my work today of why, we'll talk about that. And they didn't miss a beat, and they said, because I want to coach in the national championship. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I don't know if that's the right answer or the wrong answer, and maybe there's not a right and wrong answer, as I tend to believe. But I called up my old coach and I said, Susie, why do you coach? Like, because this doesn't seem like it fits. And she didn't hesitate. I said, okay, well, what are the top 3 reasons? Because maybe that's a little bit too much. And she didn't hesitate, and she said, the kids, the kids, the kids. And I was like, oh, this is a different mentality. Like, we got there because the focus was on making us this amazing collective whole and amazing individuals, right, on and
yep.
off the court. And that piece came too. So when you said, and I wondered when you said, grit, or that piece can't be taught, I don't know. I think it maybe can be taught, and that I think I'm being very biased and looking at this solely from my own experience. But
Yeah.
I grew up, in an environment that was very Epstein Island-esque, is all we need to say in today's times. And so I might have instinctively had the grit, but we'll never know, right? But I can tell you at 17, when I went to George Washington, I was pretty broken.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't believe in myself. I didn't have how we all look at athletes, right? And we think, oh, they've got it all together. And of course, that's never the case. But like, I can only feel my own internal experience. And I felt so opposite of seeing it all together, and so doubtful and so fearful. And so that collegiate experience was the first time that I got challenged to see what I had inside of me. And so as I think about like how athletics and especially the GW years factored into, where I am today, and the moments of me as the founder of Hootology, there's a moment where I remember I think it was my sophomore year, and my coach during practice looked him in the eyes, and she said, go home. And it was in a really intense moment of something we were trying to achieve as a team. And all I knew is there was no words to be said.
Yeah.
And I had to just shut my mouth, turn out, and run out the door.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that, because that was clear as day, go home. And it was a Friday, and I wasn't going to see her again until Monday, which means I had spent a lot of time to think and panic and all those things. And I was like, I don't know if she means go home to Arizona. I don't know if she means like get out of GW, whatever. And so I went back on Monday morning just terrified, right?
Mhm.
And I walked in and it was just like, I remember saying like, is there anything you want to say to me? Because she wasn't like, let me lecture you about what happened and let me tell you blah blah blah. And then she's like, no, is there anything you want to say to me? And I was like, can I stay? and and she looked at me and she goes, Stefanie, you've come too far to let you go backwards. And so it's like this moment of realization that we always have more in us than we think, and to get better as a human, to do the self-reflection that's constantly needed to learn the lessons that life is, for some reason we have yet to know, teaching us, that piece of like, I can't let myself go back to whatever I grew through yesterday. And that is something, especially as I'm growing Hootology through the first time ever moment of like creating a tech product and getting ready to get funding and now getting ready to get a second round of funding. It's like this, like, constant learning of like, God, yesterday was hard and I wasn't doing it perfectly, but I learned some things and I have to bring those things into today. And so I feel so lucky to have had that experience, to be able to kind of start to learn that grit that I think you're right. Some people have instinctively, and I certainly didn't.
Thank you for challenging me on that. And like, thank you for sharing your experience. I think
Yeah.
that I needed to hear that story. And I'm so grateful that you had a coach that cared about the kids first. I think that's something that is missing in a lot of athletic clubs, universities, at every level. I mean, there's going to be
Yeah.
coaches that are in it for the wrong reasons. And
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to have a coach that invested in me as a young age, as a young woman, and not just a volleyball player. And I
Yeah.
think so you know what? Maybe that grit wasn't just in me. Maybe she nurtured it from a young age, and it shows up at different points for
Yeah.
everyone.
How old were you when you had that coach?
16
Okay. Yeah.
or
Cool.
15. It was my 16th year of club volleyball. So
Yeah.
I started at 15, and I just remember she laid the foundation for actually how I want to approach every interaction I have in my life, honestly, because it is more than just a job. It's more than just a team. It's you're impacting people every time you communicate with them.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you have to take really seriously. And I think it's just an amazing perspective that you had to like ask that question at 22 and say, why are you coaching? And then to
Yeah.
get the answer that's like, that's not why I'm doing this. So am I
Yeah.
wrong? Or like,
Yeah.
let's talk about this. And I think like right there, like you mentioned in a previous conversation, like I like to challenge the like yes or no or wrong or right thinking. And you did that like right there in that moment with your coach, and you did it with me on the show. So I see it showing up.
Yeah.
It's
Cool.
awesome, Stephanie. I appreciate you sharing that story.
Of
And
course. Of course.
I want to learn a little bit about your journey to Hootology. And was there a moment in your mind where that was born for you? Or when did you start to be like, I can do this. I can do this well, and I'm going to start something?
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, I'm not. Hootology was founded in 2016, and so kind of to answer the specifics of your first part of your question of when did I know I could do this well? I hope maybe by tomorrow. I don't like. Yeah, I don't know. And I think that's the piece around being a founder is that if you're doing it right, you're terrified and you're not sure. And the alternative, right? And what's the alternative of constantly questioning and being afraid is then constantly being sure that you're got it right and you're doing everything great. And so I think this whole concept of imposter syndrome, right? Where if we're challenging ourselves, if we're unsure, like I'm not sure if that's been another lesson we've been told is a bad thing for quote unquote
Yeah.
women to have versus a strength of I don't know if I'm doing it well, right? I know of all the ways I could be better. And I know of all the things I'm working on to be a better um, leader and kind of boost up the skills that are necessary to see the vision of the company and in totality. So I don't know. The moment though, I remember a moment where I was um, wanting to find a founder that I could be the number two to. And I think that my personality, and I'm laughing because I hear my nearest and dearest what they're going to say when I say the next thing, which is my personality is to be a number two. And I feel that I hear the chorus of challenges of that. But I really truly believe it is, in terms of, I would rather do a lot of things that are more behind the scenes. I'd rather be the one, tinkering and boosting up somebody else to be out there doing all sorts of things like this, and being on stage and the stuff that I maybe instinctively don't love. But I had yet to find somebody who wanted that role, who didn't also come with a lot of the self-destructive behaviors or ego behaviors or behaviors that didn't make a great team. And so it was sort of a moment of like, well, shit, I think it has to be me. Like, begrudgingly, like and I'm still fighting against that. And and I'm now trying to get myself out of the trying to create my own little mad scientist lab, that it's still Hootology and I'm still the founder and primary shareholder, but I can just work myself into the job I actually want, and then bring someone in who wants to be, possibly the president or something of that nature, and handle HR and legal and accounting
Yeah.
and good golly, BD, sales, marketing, PR, all of that beautiful engine. I was going to call it the beast, and I need to change my language. And so I don't know. Again, maybe tomorrow I'll think I'm doing all right.
I love that. I love that. I mean, I think it's different though, because like you said, oh, I hope I do well tomorrow, but you're doing it anyway. You're doing it despite the uncertainties, despite the imposter syndrome that we're told that is, we need to overcome, and it's bad. And I think that does separate the founders or it separates people with ideas from the founders sometimes, because it's like, despite the uncertainty, I'm just going to do it. It has to be me, and I'll bring people in to help my blind spots, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
Yes. Yeah.
So you also mentioned, because I know I skipped a chapter in your career that I do want to touch on.
Okay.
You just called yourself a mad scientist, and you called yourself a mad scientist in a previous conversation when we were talking about your teaching journey. So how did you end up teaching at NYU after coaching volleyball at Iowa State? Where was the jump there?
Oof. It was a lot of years in between there, but I remember, so I moved to New York 10 years ago, and it was probably in my second or third year. So, and I remember when I went in to get my badge at NYU, and I walk out with this purple, because that's NYU's colors, purple badge with my face on it, and it said faculty. And I was like, what has happened in the world that this thing exists? And I was teaching a graduate course in global market research. And every time, I'm not what the statistical professor that my students, I think, assumed they would see when they walked into the class. And so it got to be fun for me to sit in the back, the first class, and just let everybody come in and start to wonder, like, where is this professor person? And I'd be like, I don't know, when's she coming? And then get up and be like, here we are. I think, as I think about my mentality during those 7 years, it was really around the understanding that our education systems, and I say systems because I was lucky to have students from around the world, and this was the through line through all of my students, is that we really are taught that there's a right and a wrong. And so my goal became less about, like, let me convince you to become a researcher. Let me convince you how important research is for your future decision-making roles, to like, let me hopefully start to rewire the fact that there maybe isn't a right and wrong, right? And to change the thinking that could apply to everything across their careers and maybe in their life, but that was out of my realm. And that you don't need to know the actual answer. And so as I think about that, I'm like, oh gosh, how annoying that must be to be a student, and then to come in and be like, we're all been taught you get a grade, and you're basically graded on how much you know. And I'm like, here's my scorecard. The more you don't know, the higher your grade. The more you question if you have the right answer, the higher your grade. And how frustrating that might have been. And trust me, there was a fair amount of frustration along the way, but it became of asking questions that were less about theory, right, and more about big, meaty problems to solve. So at the time, I was working a lot with ESPN and NFL, and so I would kind of make up some related kind of projects that weren't actual projects that I had worked on in my at my company, but really big things. And my students would just be quiet, right? And I'd be asking a fairly simple question, right? And I say that knowing it wasn't a simple question, but and them just not knowing what to say. And I'm like, just really come with me down this rabbit hole. Let's explore what could be possible about how to answer this question, right? So whether it be like the future of emotional connectivity and fandom, and how a large brand could make that come to life to have more of an emotional fan experience if you're watching at home versus in the arena, or even in virtual reality or whatever it might be. And so I wanted to make them free to be able to explore. And it then became, me saying, I've been doing this for 20 years and I don't know the answer to this, right? And so that's also not the assurance I think you want as a student. But what I'm saying is, like, it's okay. And it's okay to wonder, because we're never going to create something new if we just do what we're told and how we're told to do it. And so that was really my objective. And I had a lot of fun with it. And I don't know if my students always had fun with it, but I think if one of them remembers me at one moment about one decision, I will call it a win.
Yeah, we really are so conditioned through the education system to literally be right or wrong with every single thing. And now that you say that, like, you think about how that applies in life, like, people lack, like, or they can lack some creativity in spaces. Or I just think about applying it to when people are choosing a career path. Like, there's the right answer. I have to do X, Y, and Z to be successful, and I have to stay in this path and do this certain thing because that's the right way to do it. And I think people that don't align with that, or maybe don't even know what they want to do, that can be really, really stressful for them. And I'm speaking from my own experience too with that.
Yeah. And it's hard for me to remember how closed and how fearful I was for decades, for a lot of reasons, because now I really feel like anything is possible. And it's not like this rebel way, or like just let me go, be an anarchist or whatever. Like, it's not, it's coming from peace, right? It's coming from like, okay, let me look at the story. I can see the story that we've been told, that we're supposed to be blah, 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 or we're supposed to do this, this, and this. Like, what do I really want? And how could I create that without, like, being offensive to systems and things that matter and people that I care about and love? And it's really fun. It's really a free life, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah. How would you encourage listeners right now who are feeling maybe trapped in that yes or no, right or wrong, up or down thinking? And how do they start to apply that freedom to their own life? I know it's a big question, but I think you've learned this. Obviously, it's taken you so time to get there, but it really is an important skill. And like, the fact that you're able to come to that peace is what a lot of people are searching for. So if you could offer just one piece of advice, what would you say?
Well, I that's such a beautiful question. And I also have to put a caveat on it, where like structure and systems, I think, work for a lot of people. And so I wouldn't want to imply like, oh, this is better, right? This is better for me. And this, because of how fearful and constrained I was in so many ways, it feels like freedom to me, but I know that freedom there's people who have freedom with structure, right? If somebody was seeking that, though, I think it's like, this is how my mind goes here, which is common for me, but hang with me a second. Like, we literally are floating on a rock in the middle of we don't know what. and massive, massive, massive. Like I'm looking at my screensaver right now, which is a shot of the universe, a small portion of the universe, of which our solar system is just a tiny little dot. And like, I have this phrase, which I think sometimes sounds like a downer to a lot of people, but it's nothing matters. Like, I think none of this matters. I don't think this conversation matters. I don't think I matter. But it's ... So everything might as well. So it's nothing matters, so everything might as well. And so it's the realization that this thing that's frustrating, or this should that we feel from either our family or from our society or from the business culture or from whatever systems we're in, that's really just fake. Like somebody made that up, and that has become what we're supposed to do, which is almost funny given the totality of what we're here. So
Yeah.
what would you make if you could just look at, like, be like, okay, here's the thing I'm expected to do. What do I want? And how do I make this matter for my life that could make joy for me, and then therefore joy for everybody around me? And if everybody was doing that, I wonder what it would look like.
I think that's amazing.
I don't know. That's what came out.
No, Stephanie, I love that. I think nothing matters, so it might as well. And
Might as
that's,
well.
I mean, it's a really empowering phrase. Like, you think about it, yeah, nothing really matters. Like, so why not? If you have something inside of you that you want to
Yeah.
protect the world, like, that should fire you up to be able to go out and do it, because it doesn't matter. And if
Yeah.
people, I always think too that the people that are meant to support you will stay by your side. Like, no matter what you choose to do in your life, whether it's, career decisions, anything that you decide to choose for you in your life, the people that support you and love you will still be cheering you on. And if you notice
Yeah.
people that are not cheering you on anymore,
Yeah.
probably weren't authentic people to keep in your life anyway, and that's okay.
Yeah, and it's these moments, Jordan, for me, where I've truly given up because the constraints were so strong that I felt like I failed. And, I think clothing is one that I get a lot of people want to talk a lot about. And I was terrified. I mean, I was always in the wrong fitting clothes. Clothes weren't even made my size when I was growing up. I'm masculine of center and 6'1", and and then now have this sort of eclectic style. And this really grew out of like being just not fitting in with everything I was supposed to be and supposed to wear. And not to mention, when I grew up, I was supposed to be in cotillion of all things. Like, oh my gosh, could you imagine? And I had this moment last night. I'm only at the beginning part of processing this, for how insecure and uncomfortable physically and in my body and in my clothes I was for 48 years of my life, until the moment I gave up out of exhaustion and thought I had failed. And last night I was walking on the subway platform in New York City, and a subway that was parked over on the side, a full subway, a man who was probably the coolest looking dude I'd ever seen, screams across the platform, like, "You look fucking amazing!" And I was like, "Wait, what? Like, how are me? Like, what are you talking about?" And so, like, I say that not for my sake, but for that was a product of me being like, I can't do this. I can't do this thing that you're asking me to do. Hootology and what we've built with hooks is a product of like, this other thing isn't making sense to me. And so what would we do? How would I think about this if I wasn't constrained? And again, other things about my life and the fun and my close relationships. It's like me saying like, oh, what do we want to do? Like, how would we create our dynamic in our relationship if we weren't told this is how it's supposed to be? So I guess, I don't know, really long-winded answer to say, for anybody who wants a little bit of freedom or feels constrained, like, it's okay. Like, it's probably, freedom is on the other side of you just not doing what doesn't feel good in your body. So
I absolutely love that. And I think that is a perfect example. That guy yelling across the platform to you is, the right people will find you when you're living as your authentic self, or living your passion, what you want to do. The right people will find you, and you'll find the right people because you're going to put yourself in spaces where people have that in common with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. Stephanie, this has been so great. I'm like, I want to keep talking about all the things. And I know we've like barely scratched the surface with Hootology. So I do have a couple more questions that I just want to ask you about building your business. And I guess why do you think athletes build great companies? And do you surround yourself with athletes now with Hootology?
Yeah, that's I have not done that by intention, but maybe I should. I feel like there's a new group, relatively new, last couple of years, of female athletes that are supporting each other that I feel like everybody should get involved with. I I I think that athletes make um good folks on a team, I guess is what I'll say, versus leaders. Just because it's weird for me to say I'm a leader. Like, what a weird thing to say, right? I'm a team builder. How about that? Semantics. I think that we know, especially from an entrepreneurship standpoint, as an athlete who's had a certain level of success, we know that there's highs and lows along the way to get to that success, right? So it's really rare for there to be an undefeated season, right? It happens, of course, and then those are all kind of fun moments, but most of the time a team that wins the national championship or the Super Bowl or whatever, WNBA championship or whatever it might be, they've lost a lot along the way, and yet they still won. And so the ability to ride those highs and lows that don't kind of like knock us off the path, and can realize that tomorrow's another day and we got to keep going. And then also the fact that you always have a little bit more, right? I remember a couple of moments from the physical aspects of our training where, especially in that day and age, I either thought I was at death's door in practice, or like there was literally nothing left, and there had to be, right? And so being able to scoop in just a little bit more when it feels impossible is
Mhm.
is another trait that I think we had early experience with, that maybe others didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, being a part of a team, it is really important. And I'm glad you were able to have people like that with you. Um, gosh, there's just so much wisdom that you have, Stephanie. It's been so wonderful talking to you. I just know we're coming up on time, so I want to respect your day. Um, so I will wrap with this question. I always ask this question at the end of the show. It's just, what does changing the game mean to you, whether it's this chapter of your life or your career or just this season?
Yeah, it's such a great, I love kind of big general questions that could have so many different meanings. And my first thought is like, what game are we changing? Like, there's so many games that need changing. and and as I think about that across the board, I think the game that I want to change is like comfort with vulnerability, and we're what we as a society call vulnerability. And kind of tying it back to the Annie Leibovitz piece, or tying it back to not being sure of what the right answer is, or tying it back to just sharing a new idea or a new possibility of something, right? I think that's the consistency of this conversation, is just wanting everyone to get comfortable what feels right for them and that feels scary, and being able to say that, because I think you're spot on. If you can say what's true for you, and a lot of times that is vulnerable, or out of the pack, the right people are going to find you. And so if we could all, hopefully the game could be changed where, one, a broad spectrum of emotions are acceptable. I think we get caught thinking that if we're not happy, we're failing, and when really we all are wired to have a lot of different feelings, right? Anger, frustration, sadness, hurt, embarrassment, and happiness. And if the more we could accept that and let that be part of the highs and lows of our own human journey, I think it'd be a different world, and just more comfort being what people would call vulnerable. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a game I want to change.
Thank you so much for being here, Stephanie, and sharing your wisdom. Where can our listeners find you or connect with you if they'd like to after the episode?
Oh gosh, well, unfortunately, I'm on LinkedIn, Stefanie Francis, Stephanie with an F, and I'm based in New York City. Or I met Stephanie at Hootology, and again, Stephanie has an F, so F and Steph, which tracks on a couple levels.
I like that. I like that. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you to the audience for listening too. But Stephanie, I'm so grateful that you spent some time with us today and shared your wisdom, got vulnerable, and brought the authenticity. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. Thanks for doing this.